This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Welcome to episode 191 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today's topic is travellers with a disability. I have learnt over the years from my good friend Julie, who features at the end of this podcast, that the proportion of people who are travelling with a disability is massive. So the stats show that 1 in 5 travellers travel with a disability. So this is not a small issue by any means, but I can only imagine that there are often barriers to travel, and having a disability is an extra one. So I think that it's important to discuss this and make sure that we can hopefully encourage people to travel no matter what barriers are in front of them, because of all those benefits that I often rave on about. Now, before we get to the episode today, I just want to give a shout out to the Thoughtful Travellers Book Club. Just recently we wound up our May reading of Around the World in 80 Trains, and we had a Facebook Live discussion. Thanks, Justin, for helping me out with that. And it was a fabulous book. If you like train travel in any vague way, do get hold of Monisha Rajesh's Around the World in 80 Trains. So cool. But if you're curious to join us in the Thoughtful Travellers Book Club, you can see all the details at notaballerina.com/book club. And this month, for June 2020, we are reading Eric Newby's A Short Walk in the Hindu Kush, and it's fun for especially considering how long ago it was written, back in the 50s. It's just lovely fun. So I hope you will join us in the Thoughtful Travellers Book Club. We also talk about it in the Facebook group Thoughtful Travellers on Facebook, obviously. All right. Now let's get on with today's episode. My first guest today is Seana Smith. And Seana speaks about how she has travelled over the years with her son, who has a disability.
I must start off by telling you some of the terrible experiences that we had when my son was a baby. So my son, who is now 23, was diagnosed when he was 3 with autism spectrum disorder. But that meant from when he was a baby till when he was 3, we didn't know that he had that. Mm-hmm. He was just really quite a handful. He was super hyperactive, and he would run away and crawl away and not look back. Mm-hmm. There were all sorts of things that once he was diagnosed, we understood. And one of those things was that he would never sleep at night in a new place. So anywhere we went that was new, he would be awake all night, and it was absolutely exhausting and demoralizing. So we actually went to live in Pakistan for a year when he was a baby. Oh, wow. And I remember arriving in Pakistan thinking, here I am with my new baby, and I'm very adventurous. And I saw this brochure for yak trekking in the Himalayas, and I genuinely thought I would take my baby on a yak. But he had other ideas. And I remember going for a weekend in Islamabad and another weekend away, and we stayed in a hotel, and he was awake for hours at night, and we would be pushing this pram up and down, feeling terrible. So we had a lot of low moments with that. And then once we got to Australia when he was nearly 2, and then he was diagnosed, then we had to adapt to suit him. So we would often go to the same place. So we'd go to a place at Kangaroo Valley, then we would go to a place at Jarvis Bay, and he knew the house, and we'd keep going back to the same place. And then when he was a little bit older, if we took him somewhere brand new, we would show him videos of where we were going. We'd say, so we're going to this place, and here's the house, and show him lots of pictures and talk it through with him. And he was a visual learner. So once he'd seen the pictures, he would settle down a lot more there. Yeah. And he was really hyperactive. So we had to take him to places with playgrounds with fences around them and stuff like that. Mm. And we actually really had to adapt our life a lot And therefore we know, Jarvis Bay, where we've been lots of times, really well, which has been nice, I think, for us.
Yeah, there's actually something quite nice about returning to a place many times, and often we don't because we always want to go somewhere new, but when you have to, right, then there's definitely some benefits. So, yeah.
So, and also because he was so active, we got to know Sydney so much better because I was out with him all the time. He never played with toys. He didn't do puzzles and games and things like that. We were out. So we were, once he could swim, we were at every beach in Sydney. Because I would get bored of going to the same places, the beaches, showing the pictures, and off would go. So, yeah, that was really interesting. And then as he's got older, he became much more flexible. And we would just have to show him what we're doing, talk it through. And like a lot of other families do this sort of thing as well, we'd have maybe a diary and we'd say on this day we're going to this place and on that day we're going to that place. And we took him to Scotland a few times and we'd tell him exactly what was happening on each day. So that was great. That was really good. And then as he got older and became a teenager, he didn't want to go away with his friends, luckily, till he was much older. But he did start wanting to do things on his own, which was terribly nerve-wracking. And what he usually would want to do would be to go to concerts because he loves music and he loves heavy metal music and bands with the kind of passion that only a person on the spectrum can bring to an activity.
An obsession.
There is a lot to say for it, the pleasure that he gets out of it.
Oh, that's so nice.
Oh, it's wonderful. And, I've learned a lot from him, but having simple pleasures that you just get a massive amount of joy out of, I think we could all do with a bit of that, really.
So true.
So I had taken him to Scotland a few times, and when he was 18, his dad took him to visit some of his, they went to the Beatles Museum, which was a big place, a favourite of his in Liverpool, and they went and they saw some of the football stadiums that he loves. So that was a great trip with Paul, my husband. However, when he was a bit older, he told us that he wanted to go to a 3-day heavy metal festival in Germany, and I nearly fainted. I just thought, I thought I'd have to go with him, and I couldn't think of anything.
No, 3 days of heavy metal.
Make me go camping in a field in Germany. So that was in 2018 he went, and I'd say we planned for that for 18 months.
Wow.
So I really helped him with absolutely everything. I helped him book all the flights, all the accommodation, the tent, everything. And very fortunately, a friend of his went with him, who is a neurotypical young man who's also really into heavy metal and who's also got British background. But I still thought I would have to go. So for, over a year of planning, I thought, right, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to stay in the village, I thought, near the place. And then I thought I might be able to go to Hamburg and stay in Hamburg. And, he developed, and he just got more capable. And by the time he actually went, I was in Scotland with the twins and looking after my mum, really. And I didn't go with him. And he and his friend flew off with sheets of paper. Each day had its own bit of paper with everything that was to happen. And they got on absolutely fine, the two of them, which I think is remarkable. Because two 21-year-olds, it could have all gone wrong. But they got on the buses at the right time. They stayed at the hostels at the right time. He did have a disaster in London where he lost his money at 3:00 in the morning. So that was a bit of a worry. And he did come and stay with us for a bit. But really, you could see from when he started saying he wanted it to when he went that he had really changed. And now he'd like to go again. And he actually has, instead of me doing all the booking, I've sat beside him whilst he did the booking.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
another stage of development, yeah.
Development, and there he is. He's, he has got significant learning difficulties and a language disorder, but his enthusiasm and his joy means that he's able to do all sorts of things, and he'll just keep developing.
This is a great story from Seana. to see the development over the years and her pleasure in her son being able to be independent enough to not need her to experience 3 days of heavy metal festival camping in Germany, because we both agreed that is not our preferred way to spend 3 days, but each to their own. Now, you might remember a couple of years back, I had a guest post on my blog from a Perth blogger I met through my blogging work, actually, Jen, and she was diagnosed as an adult as being on the autism spectrum, and wrote about her trip to Cambodia in that light. So I'll leave a link in the show notes to that. Now, my next guest today is Suzanne Kamata, and she's married to a Japanese guy, lives in Japan with their 2 adult children. Her daughter lives with cerebral palsy and is a wheelchair user, but Suzanne still wanted her to be able to see the world. And Suzanne's originally from the States, so wanted to be able to make sure she could still travel, and made sure that this could happen. So she started off by taking her daughter on short trips, like from their hometown in rural Japan to Osaka, but then made it possible to go further.
After the first trip to Osaka, I was like, okay, we did that. It was fun. And then I decided to try to go with her by myself to America. And we went on a family trip. It was my brother and his family and my parents. So I had a lot of help. I knew there'd be a lot of people around to help with the wheelchair, like if I had to lift it or carry it.
Mm-hmm. That's handy.
Yeah. And it was kind of interesting. Like, I expected America to be accessible. Everything would be accessible, I thought, because of the laws.
Yeah.
But it wasn't quite that way. Like, we would stop at a fast food place or something, and then they would have, the accessible toilet stall, but like the paper towels would be like really high or something, like you could
right, yeah,
unless you wash your hands properly, things like that. So just little things, as if people who design these spaces didn't actually try it out with a wheelchair.
Mm-hmm. They made sure the doorway was wide enough, and that's where they stopped.
Yeah, maybe. And even like in where we live, like the local famous fast food, I don't know if I should say the name of it.
You can, go on.
McDonald's, okay, it's McDonald's. And the toilet stall isn't wide enough for a wheelchair. Or in another McDonald's, the bathroom is on the second floor and there's no way to get up there.
Oh, wow.
Little things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, they are little things until you need it, and then it's not a little thing, then it's a real issue. Makes life hard. And just not knowing where you're, when you're traveling, not knowing what the next place is going to be like.
Right. And you think McDonald's, it's like a, big famous, American chain. So they probably conform to, various rules about accessibility, but that's not always the case.
Yeah.
And another thing, a lot of times, like the elevator or whatever that, to go to the next floor is like way out of the way someplace, like you have to travel a good bit to get to it.
Yeah, in the back corner of the building and stuff like that. Yeah.
So that's kind of a problem as well, but I discovered these things, but I always try to, not always actually, like sometimes I get really upset about these things, and my daughter's, she's kind of calm and cool and collected, and she wouldn't be upset, but I'm upset, so that upsets her. So I try to, I try to use her as an example of how to behave.
Yeah.
Not to be always in a rage.
Yeah.
There are other ways to, effect change.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. She sounds very wise.
Yeah. And then another thing that happened on this trip was that my brother had arranged for us to visit some caverns. Like there are a lot of caves in Tennessee.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, that'd be really great. And then and I think my brother told them that one of us was in a wheelchair.
Mm-hmm.
But then when we arrived at the cave, they said it wasn't, like, she would have to walk up like 100 steps.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't really accessible. And I was really upset at first. And I really wanted my daughter to go into this cave and have, see stalactites and
have that experience, yeah.
Yeah, and I was really upset about it, but then I didn't want to ruin the trip for everybody, so I tried to calm myself down, and then they reached a compromise that we could go into the first cavern, and my daughter could, look around and take pictures and things.
Suzanne went on to tell me that she and her daughter more recently have been on a trip to Paris, and that was, one of those real trip of a lifetime experiences. In fact, I also read about it in Suzanne's book, which I'll mention in the show notes. Now, my final guest today is Julie Jones. Julie and I have been friends through blogging initially for quite a few years, and she's one of the most inspiring yet humble people I know. So I wanted to get her on specifically to talk about the magazine that she co-founded, which is called Travel Without Limits. And her whole kind of the impetus behind it is to really share stories of people who have lived experience of traveling with a disability. And it might sound that I'm getting something promotional happening, and it's deliberate. I didn't ask Julie to say buy my magazine, but I want to say have a look at Travel Without Limits, because I think it's something really, really worth supporting. I have read it, and it's always really fascinating stuff and of interest to everyone. Anyway, I will now let Julie tell you a bit more about this magazine.
So Travel Without Limits is Australia's first disability-specific travel magazine, and the idea is that I really want people to be able to see representation in media that they can relate to. When my son Braden was little, there was nothing in family travel magazines or newspapers or television, travel shows that showed a family like ours using a wheelchair or needing a beach wheelchair, getting about and doing things. So there was nothing that we could really relate to. So I always wanted to fulfill that gap and started writing for my own blog, and then that didn't feel like enough, because although I was reaching an audience, I really wanted it to be that family that hadn't found the blog to find it in a magazine, and there seemed to be no representation in mainstream media. And having a story in a magazine is twofold. It educates people who are not in that position, and shows them positive imagery of somebody with a disability actively involved in life. And it also helps somebody who is in that position to realise that they can have a holiday and they can do certain things. So when I started writing for magazines, it was lovely. But then I thought, well, one story in a big magazine isn't much. Wouldn't it be great to have more? So I was very lucky to co-found Travel Without Limits with Janice Keller. And now we have a magazine filled with stories from people who have lived experience travelling, and whether that's from the deaf community, somebody with a vision impairment, somebody who's a wheelchair user, and all kinds of family mixes. So we really want to show, the father who is travelling with his 2 able-bodied children and his wife to Hawaii, who's a wheelchair user, parenting his children and having experiences with his children as a wheelchair user travelling. And there might be a family with a child who has chronic condition, trying to give that child, a bucket list trip because they have a life-limiting illness. So it's just that representing all the variety, the spectrum of people wanting to travel with a disability.
All those families and travellers that are generally missed out in the mainstream media. Have you had some, positive feedback from readers or new people who found you through the magazine?
Oh, we've had really positive feedback, which is lovely. Just people can't quite believe, even on the other side of the world. Somebody in San Francisco the other day was just saying, I can't believe there is a magazine full of stories of people with disability. And also, it's lovely if there is a tourism provider or attraction, for them to have somewhere to actually showcase the fact that they've got something that's truly accessible, and highlight it to the community that will really benefit from it.
Yeah, exactly. I remember I've read stats before on your site. Is it like 1 in 5 travellers travels with a disability or something enormous like that?
Yes, 1 in 5. So it's not niche. And yeah, unfortunately, it's still seen as a niche market. But if you consider, for even in our small family, my mother-in-law ended up using a walking frame and a wheelchair sort of as she aged. My brother-in-law has a prosthetic limb now through diabetes. My sister-in-law has recently had a stroke and will probably need to have modified ways of getting around. And then obviously our family, my son lives with cerebral palsy. So that's one small example of a family and the diverse range of reasons for people having a disability and the span of ages. So whether it's just wanting to take your grandma on an experience that she hasn't had that she really wants to go on, or, a young child, somebody who's had a motor vehicle accident, there's just such a range of things that it's really good to be able to explore it as a topic.
Oh, absolutely. Because I imagine that, probably, you felt when your son was diagnosed with cerebral palsy that you probably thought we might, maybe you went through the, oh my goodness, we can't travel, we certainly can't travel the way we used to. And to have that, to be able to have access to all those stories of people who have still traveled must really help a lot of people to think, oh, maybe we can do it.
That's right. And I think for us, we thought, oh, well, travel's out the window for a long time. And then we realized that, you need to do more than therapy, and that travel is actually really good bonding experience as a family. And for siblings, I think it's important. Everyone needs a break. Everyone needs something to look forward to. And I think the other thing is that the stories of people with lived experience, some people obviously are just having very tame holidays and just enjoying a holiday, but other people are doing the most amazing things, and I think it really shatters those preconceived ideas of a wheelchair means the end of, say, adrenaline sports or those more extreme adventures that you can have as a traveller. So I think it's good to break down that idea that many people have as well, and being able to showcase those stories.
I'm going to jump ahead with my links for today and mention it straight away that if you're curious about Julie's magazine, just head to travelwithoutlimits.com.au and you can get all the information and subscribe from there. Trust me, it's awesome. So anyway, thank you very much for listening to episode 191 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. I've got a bunch of links I want to share this time. So all the links will be listed in the show notes, and the show notes are at notaballerina.com/191 for episode 191. One of the links will actually be a link to a previous episode where I talked about travel with disability and chronic illness. It was quite a while back, episode 53 in the first year or two. So it is at notaballerina.com/53. Also includes a chat with Julie from back then. In fact, a chat we recorded in 2016. It seems crazy. How did that time disappear like that? Also, I'm going to share a couple of links to other bloggers who've written about travel with a disability. One of my clients here in Perth, her name is Seana Smith, and she blogs at littlebodyhugelife.wordpress.com and wrote a great blog post recently about how she had some adventures in Bali. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to leave a link to the traveling to Cambodia from Jen, who's on the autism spectrum. So thank you very much to my fabulous guests. I started off chatting with Seana Smith, and Shauna's website is Hello Sydney Kids. So you can find her at hellosydneykids.com.au. Suzanne Kamata, thanks to you as well, and you can find more about her work at suzannekamata.com, and I'll leave a link to her book, Squeaky Wheels, which is all about travels with her daughter, and a lovely read. Also, of course, huge thanks to Julie, and you can find out more about Julie's work at Have Wheelchair Will Travel, which is at havewheelchairwilltravel.net, and of course, Travel Without Limits magazine. Don't forget, come and join our group for Thoughtful Travellers on Facebook. Just search for Thoughtful Travellers, or there's a link in the show notes. We are closing in on 1,000 members. That's my big, exciting next celebration, I think. So I look forward to celebrating with you. Come and join us. And as always, thank you very much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.